Before we begin today's podcast, I wanted to answer the most emailed question that pops up in my inbox. Neil, how do you earn your living outside of this daily tech podcast? Well, seeing as you ask, if you're starting 2021 and have a long list of goals for the new year, but a lack of time to bring them to life, remember, you can work one-to-one with me in a number of areas. For example, if you want to hit record on a conversation in Zoom or Microsoft Teams, I can edit those files and help you launch your own podcast and help you have a show like this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and all the usual platforms. Equally, if your leadership team needs help with ghostwritten thought leadership articles, or you need someone to manage the content for your business blogs, pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find more information on how you can work with me. And you'll also find links to 1,500 interviews on the Tech Talks Daily podcast, plus my shows with Netgear and Citrix. But enough from me, on with today's show.
Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where this aging ex-IT guy who still has a few P1 battle scars to prove it explores how technology is transforming our lives, business and indeed world. And one tech trend that we cannot afford to ignore is the world of cyber attacks, malware and ransomware. But what if businesses could have a more proactive than reactive approach? And if they really did need to react and change something, what if enterprises could reduce the average time for security change requests from, let's say, 72 hours down to 15 to 30 minutes to react and stop the attack so much quicker? Obviously, this is so much more important now because of the rise in cyber attacks, which has led to breaches that can shut down entire IT systems. Not to mention leak client data and intellectual property and potentially halt production. So enterprises need to have an immediate response to those security threats, not wait for the next CAB meeting. And that essentially is what Open Systems is doing, which is a secure access service edge pioneer that are delivering all that and much more right now. So this IT guy felt compelled to find out more. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Switzerland so we can speak with Rick Loganaka, CISO of Open Systems. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Rick. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Neil, it's a real pleasure to meet, and thanks for your time. I'm speaking today from Switzerland, and my name is Rick Loganaka. I'm currently the CISO for Open Systems. We're a global security and connectivity leader headquartered in Zurich, Switzerland, and Redwood City, California. Also a Microsoft Gold partner, a member of MISA, their security group, and a member of FIRST, the Global Incident Response Forum. So a little bit about me. I'm an American guy based here in Switzerland a couple of years. Kind of followed the family back from the US, back to Switzerland. And prior to this job, I was at a company called Verisure Securitas Direct. We were a leader in the home and small business alarm market. And I actually worked for the United Nations for a number of years. I worked both in New York and Geneva to build the UN's global security program. So thanks again for the time, and it's a pleasure to be here.
No, thank you for coming on. And I always try and find out a little something about a guest before they come on, because I'm convinced there's a story behind everyone's career in tech. But when I was researching you, I came across you once ran the New York Marathon without any training. Is that right?
Yeah. So I used to be in the nuclear business for like 7 years, lived in the US and Sweden, actually. And in Sweden, I started running. And I joined the UN back in 2010 or so, and a couple of months in, one of the guys at work basically hurt his foot about 3 days before the marathon. And he says, hey, can you run this for me? And I said, no, Sandor, yeah, it's probably going to be pretty painful. Went out and ran 10K, came back, said, okay, give it a shot, and went out and did it. And I can tell you that with all the people there, the London Marathon's equally as impressive. It's just so much energy, and it was just an incredible experience.
And it took a few days to get over it, I would imagine. A lot of pain.
Yeah. You can't. It's usually the second day when you can't walk, but that's.
Yeah. Now, there are constant increases in cyber threats at the moment, which often lead, of course, to breaches that can shut down IT systems, leak client data and intellectual property, and potentially even halt production. And there have been cyber attacks discovered even on vaccine distribution operations. I know we were talking about a vaccine before we even started recording today, but can you tell me a little bit more about that and how and why enterprises need to have an immediate response to security threats? Because there's just no avoiding it now, is there?
Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk at length about the security around research in the vaccine and why different parties might be interested in it. But if I cycle it, away from the vaccine bit, I think essentially this issue is only getting more and more important. And I'm not sure, but probably you saw in the news today. Foxconn, one of our major global manufacturers, often associated with Apple, was hit with a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
And essentially, the ask, or the initial ask, is a tune of $34 million. And if you look in the case of a ransomware attack, seconds count in these types of cyber attacks, and really damage can be prevented or at least minimized if it's really contained early. And if you're an enterprise, you're out there, I mean, nobody wants to go through this. And essentially, the focus is kind of prevention or thinking ahead on an incident. And an enterprise should focus on identifying and responding to breaches as much as on prevention. So a preventative activity not only is your controls that you might put in place through a security program, but it's also setting up how you're going to detect and respond to incidents when they happen. So essentially, identification has a limited value without a fast response. And in order to be able to respond, you need that quick teamwork. You need to have playbooks prepared, clear escalation processes, an established chain of command, et cetera. So, and again, for most enterprises in 2020 and shifting to 2021, I think this has become a real reality, and that's why they're looking very hard at what they can do.
And for people that are listening to our conversation today and hearing about you and open systems for the first time, can you tell me a little bit more about what kind of problems you solve and what makes you stand out in this incredibly crowded market?
Well, Neil, thanks for the question. And there's a lot of different security partners and vendors in the market today. But I can tell you personally that I'm exceptionally happy to have joined Open Systems in the fall here. And more than 10 years ago, I was a customer. We used them in one particular area that essentially, without prior knowledge, so I didn't actually know who the company was. And Open really puts in the extra effort, and is quite, or we like to say, crazy good at cybersecurity. We really go the extra mile with our customers, and those who have worked with us would tell you that we definitely stand out simply for that reason. The company itself has 30 years of experience in managed service delivery, and it has very deep expertise in both SD-WAN and security. We're actually in over 185 countries. We've pioneered SASE before Gartner gave it a name. We've got more than 8,000 deployments and cover more than 3 million corporate users. And if I go back to kind of our extra differentiator of going that extra mile for our customers, our people are very well trained. They complete 400 hours of hands-on training, pass rigorous certification testing before actually being admitted to the team. And I can really, truly say this. With regards to security, we really focus on early detection and containment of threats. And our mindset is to deliver outcomes and not alerts, something you might not necessarily find with a lot of the other vendors out there.
And one of the reasons that I invited you on the podcast today was I recently read about a new solution that you've got for enterprises that can reduce the average time for security change requests from 72 hours to 15 to 30 minutes. Now, as an ex-IT guy, that blows me away. Can you expand on that?
Well, okay. Look, I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts before and really appreciate the material over the years. Really fun stuff on YouTube as well. But I think one of the things you've seen is that everybody's gone cloud. Doesn't matter who they are, especially accelerated with COVID. And I think it's rare that you might not speak to a business nowadays, with remote work, or who is not on 365 or some other suite. And in our view, for a SOC, you need to have a cloud native response platform. And our managed detection and response solution is just that. Basically, that Sec DevOps that we've implemented really allows from that movement of the old school approach to long-term changes, within an IT environment to that shorter period of time that you mentioned. And I think the other thing that you basically could look at through this and be willing to hear, your thoughts on this. But I mean, when I talk to different people and from my own experience of actually building a SOC at my last organization, these projects can be multi-million euro, dollar, pound investments and really take years to implement. Many more organizations now are really looking to partner up with companies to augment their teams and their capabilities. And, even if I recall correctly, Gartner, I think, has said for next year, as far as MDR or operations are concerned, that about 50% of companies are looking for this outsourced or partnered augmentation or capability to add to their programs. From our end, how we actually get to that 72 hours, in that time period, 15 to 30 minutes that we specified is really, we have, multiple key elements to our service. We've got 24/7 monitoring, which I guess doesn't lead to those results directly, but allows for it. We really rely and we partnered with Microsoft as far as their SIEM Sentinel is concerned. And really then from there, we combine data with context. We actually have developed our own machine learning and automation with this. And again, as mentioned before, we really staff this with DevSecOps people that got a lot of experience and are pretty deep. Long term, or what you want to say, the big value add is that many organizations struggle to field their teams, struggle to work with their IT in other areas to actually implement this sort of speed. And we really act as a catalyst for that with our approach and with our expertise.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on all the things you said there. And another trend that I'm increasingly seeing, of course, is that proactive rather than reactive approach. And I think that if a user calls a service desk to report a breach or a key application going down, you're already too late. I think that's the expectation now. But I'm curious, what is the secret to recognizing normal activity versus attack patterns? And where do you begin to approach something like that?
Well, I would maybe counter, the idea that a user calling a service desk is too late. It's never too late to report something, right?
Yeah.
You basically want to, train your people, regardless of where they are in the world or what they're doing, that security is quite important, and it boils down to them, right? If you look at most organizations nowadays, if I bring, for example, a major telecom in the UK, Vodafone, I think since the start of COVID, their real focus has not necessarily been on the technical aspects of things, but actually educating their people. However, they're also coming at it from a position of being a large provider and actually having SOC on SOC, right? They've got country level SOCs as well as a central SOC. So they've got a lot of that technical stuff in place already. And, for many different organizations, one of the things that, especially smaller organizations or mid-sized organizations that maybe have, a small to medium-sized security team, essentially they need to start realizing that they're probably in a state of breach and stuff is happening. And their risk is going up, and therefore their, either monetary, reputational, or operational risks are going up and costs are going up. And the prospect of things like ransomware is definitely very well happen. I mean, I've talked with our insurers, I've talked with other insurance companies. There's been a record number of payouts in the last year or so. So essentially, these company boards are taking notice, and essentially more is being asked of these teams in a short period of time. And essentially from there, that's when they're starting to look around and start to take a more of a proactive approach by partnering with different companies like Open Systems to work through their response capabilities.
And I'm curious, you did mention the importance of educating staff there. From the conversations that you're having with companies, are they finally moving away from that awful compliance training that you go through during the onboarding? You hit next 20 times and then that's it for the rest of your career there. But are you seeing a move away from that?
Oh, I think that'll always have a place, but obviously, basically, we believe in good communication. Obviously, any company that we work with, should pay attention to how they can appropriately communicate to their people. And then we augment that, of course, with technical response, detection and response, to really help out their IT and security teams. But essentially, if you look at kind of overall trends, I think, across Europe, the US, et cetera, I mean, security awareness business and firms are booming, right? And there's all sorts of creative stuff out there now, whether this, kind of be targeted, phishing attacks with education behind them, different ways of communicating, bringing in modern marketing techniques and communication techniques, short videos, et cetera. I definitely think, if I look at, what was it, like 7 years ago, when I developed the first information security awareness course with a partner in Ireland, for all of our staff, which was, some basic modules. We kind of thought we were on the leading edge. We had good responses to it. But I mean, if you look at the options that are happening now and things that people are embracing as part of general awareness, whether or not this be within the company or outside of the company, I think there's a lot of really cool things happening.
And on that compliance training topic there, I'll always remember when I was working in IT, I was working in the event industry, and it was a time where there was a lot of concern about a potential terrorist attack. So we had to do a training course on how you would react if an attack took place. And I'll always remember this question. It was, if a gunman entered the building, would you hide behind a metal door or a pair of curtains?
That's a really good question, and I don't have a straight answer.
You can get back to me on that one.
Yeah.
But can you tell me a little bit more about how you could automate the process to allow security engineers to focus on identifying and containing threats early in the cyber kill chain? Because again, it's a very serious subject, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I think everybody probably listening, you've got some interest in this area.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard a lot about, SOAR and orchestration, automation, response, and things. There's a lot of companies out there doing some really great things right now. But essentially, one of the things that I've found, having tried some of these solutions and been a customer, for instance, of, when I built my own SOC, I've bought a SIEM solution. I've looked and tried out different SOAR options on top of it. Essentially, it's very, very difficult to do in-house because essentially you've got to have your house in order with all your data. Essentially, you've got to build around that. You've got to get kind of mature operations in place, and then you go into SOAR where you try to automate those operations, and that's quite a significant journey. From our perspective, since Microsoft came out with Sentinel, we thought it was a really brilliant product. It's kind of developer first and does a pretty good job. And we've actually taken it further in terms of how you can manage the amount of data you have, what your costs are, and then how you actually integrate automation. And kind of relying on that Microsoft perspective where a lot of companies have gone, we actually bought a subsidiary. It's called Born in the Cloud, under a fellow named Paul Keeley, who's basically been a Microsoft MVP for 11 years. And a lot of these organizations, as we know, and their business has been great, have shifted to Microsoft. And we really build on his team and as well as our developed team's insider knowledge of different Microsoft correlations as a baseline. And then in addition, we've been able to decide on and place key sensors. And we're then able to use different use cases and specific alerts at a higher fidelity and then build that into automation. I've also mentioned too, the black magic, you could say, of machine learning or AI, as some like to call it. And we've actually also purchased another data science company, which basically we bake them in with our MDR offering, which is kind of, you won't normally find, especially if you'd work this in-house, there's no way you have the capability. But then from the alternative end, you have to look at security from a data science perspective, which security people don't often do. And essentially this combination of of ingredients in the soup allows us then to create that automation that eliminates more false positives, reduces signal to noise, things like this. So then our engineers are actually able to focus on suspicious behavior and really determine if they see a threat or not. I will cycle back. Regardless of all this automation, it still is about fundamentals and having good operations and good people. However, all these tools really speed up the process, and we're able to contain threats earlier in the kill chain.
Something I've got to ask about, of course, is what about false positive rates? Because I suspect that's something that will resonate with every person listening in that industry. So, how do you overcome that challenge?
Well, false positives are always a challenge. I mean, I can relay one of our customers that we've, onboarded in the last 6 months. I think even after an onboarding phase of 1 to 2 months, the day that we turn on the service, within 24 hours, we still had 350 false positives, which we quickly worked through. But, again, it's always a reliance a bit on experience and how you've worked through this stuff. If you were deploying this yourself, you're going to have to work through it yourself. And that's where the time comes in. Of course, we recognize that every customer, that we work with, he or she knows their business better than we know it. So, of course, our goal is to enable with them with a good service and a good platform, and then work with them to quickly work through what may or may not be a false positive. And in some cases, some of our customers have embraced our full stack option. As I mentioned before, we're kind of a leading provider in SASE. So that's kind of different layers of a network stack, and it's a bit of a software-defined modern approach. So it's SD-WAN, firewall management, connectivity through VPN if you use that, or CASB or ZTNA. And essentially, the customers that we have the best success with in terms of reducing false positives and speed of deployment, and conversely, actually level of protection, is folks that have worked with us in deploying out that full stack, which then immediately gives us a very, very reliable data set that we're able to, apply the stuff that we've already determined as far as our machine learning and other processes to really hone out those false positives. So, that's, there's a lot of different approaches with it. And what it boils down to is, good data in, will lead to less false positives out.
And I did mention a few moments ago about that desire for a proactive rather than reactive approach in businesses. Is that something you're seeing? And also, the big question in cybersecurity that often gets asked is the value of cybersecurity recognized by the board level now?
Well, that's a great question. And you've been in the game for a while, and you've, just like security awareness, we're seeing a lot of awareness and improvement in terms of both awareness of this topic at the board level and resources for security leaders out there. And I can tell you from what I've seen, and also, what I'm hearing from different people around, that yes, boards are definitely taking notice. So if we then look from there, there's many factors leading into that. And one of them, it is increased risk and exposure across the industry, and all these different stories like ransomware at, hospitals and manufacturing and the stories about, maybe state-sponsored stuff as far as, vaccines are concerned. But essentially, boards are realizing that this, is a very strong potential risk now. There is a monetary or an operational cost that could potentially be associated with it. And more importantly, in many cases, reputationally. And quite frankly, the insurance man is also coming a bit stronger in terms of his requirements, his due diligence, and his rates are increasing. So it's something that definitely in the context of business, meaning funding isn't necessarily double from year to year in terms of this topic based on the business environment, but it definitely is receiving more attention. And I think a lot of folks have seen that some of the walls or the challenges they might have seen in different organizations from their senior leadership or from their board is actually decreasing and boiling over then into an ask, actually.
And something that's had far too much attention is 2020. I think we've all done every topic in 2020 to death. So looking forward, what is next for Open Systems in 2021? Is there anything that particularly excites you or makes you hopeful for the road ahead?
Oh, I can't tell you. As I've talked about, we feel we do crazy good security, and we're looking forward to a crazy good 2021. And our real focus is to continue adding new capabilities and new customers with our services, specifically around security and our MDR service. And we're working on building market share. So I even spoke recently to a contact in the UK. He said right now, perhaps outside of major players in the UK for security services or SOC services, there aren't really many options. And I guess all I can say about 2021, stay tuned. Those of you out there who are looking, you might have a few more shortly in that market.
I do love a good teaser. That means I'm going to have to get you back on next year, Rick. But before I do let you go, can I let you remind everyone listening of where they can find you guys online and also contact your team if they do have any questions? Oh,
most definitely. You can find us at www.open-systems.com. That's our website. Again, www.open-systems.com. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out directly to me or, somebody else from the company that you might have stumbled across. We have sales reps in multiple continents, and I think we speak up to 12 languages. So, bring it on.
Well, I love what you're doing here. And I think one lesson we've all learned from 2020 is we do need to move a little bit quicker and adapt and evolve with the landscape so much quicker now. And the fact that you reduce the average time for those security change requests from 72 hours to 15 to 30 minutes is fantastic. So all I've got to say is a big thank you for joining me today and keep doing crazy good security.
Hey, thanks, Neil. Really appreciate it.
There are so many great stories about Open Systems and how their customized automation solutions can respond so much more quickly and effectively to security threats and shift to a more unified managed detection and response solution. But that is just one company's story. I'm curious, how are you tackling all the problems that we've talked about today? This is an open forum. It's not just about me. It's not just about today's guest. It's about you listening. And I'd love to get your story, your journey, your insights and expertise onto this show too. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Keep those messages coming in. You listening, your engagement, that's what makes this show what it is. So I'll await your messages and prepare for tomorrow's interview. But all that's left for me to say, of course, is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.